So this month we're going to be discussing verse 23 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. This is the first of a series of 4 verses that are talking specifically about ego. There is a continuity with the previous 2 verses. In verse 21, Bhagavan said, if one asks what is the truth of many texts that say oneself seeing oneself and seeing God, and then the answer he gives is, since oneself is one, how is oneself to see oneself? If it is not possible to see, implying if it's not possible to see oneself, how to see God? Then these are all questions he's asked, and then he gives the answer in the final sentence: becoming food is seeing. Becoming food means becoming food to God. In other words, being consumed by God, being assimilated by God, becoming one with God. That's a very terse and beautiful way Bhagavan has of saying it. Becoming food is seeing. That means we can know ourselves as we actually are only when our ego is eradicated. And our ego is eradicated by merging back into its source, which is ourself as we really are. That is what Bhagavan describes allegorically as becoming food. Then in verse 22, he explains how to become food. He asks a rhetorical question. Consider, except by turning the mind back within, completely immersing it in God, who shines within that mind, giving light to the mind, how to fathom God by the mind. Here the term he uses, which means fathom, in what it implies is how to know God. God is nothing but our real nature. So how to know our real nature by the mind or by the ego. It's possible only by turning the mind back within and completely immersing it in God. What he described here as completely immersing it in God is the same as what he described in the previous verse as becoming food. So it's only by losing ourselves completely in God, in our real nature, that we know our real nature, as we know ourselves as we actually are. So those are the 2 previous verses, 21 and 22. But what is this? What is it that has to become food? What is it that has to be immersed in God? It's mind, he says there, but here he describes more about the mind. Incidentally, in verse 22, the term that he uses for mind is mati, which is a word that he uses in this verse also. But so there's also continuity in the wording, but he uses in a slightly different, well, yes, generally in the same sense, but slightly different sense here in this verse. But anyway, before we come to that, I'll first read the first 3 sentences of this verse. Seem to be 3 isolated ideas. The connection between them isn't immediately apparent until one thinks about it. But Bhagavan wants us to express it in such a way because he wants us to think carefully about it. The first 3 sentences are: first sentence he says, "This body does not say I." Second sentence he says, "No one says in sleep, I do not exist." And in the third sentence he says, after one thing I rises, everything rises. So there is a connection between these. I'll explain it as I go along. So in the first sentence he says, nāṉeṅṛḍṛu i-d-dēham navilādu. That literally means this body does not say I. But the verb he uses here is navilādu, which means to say, or does not say. But though he uses the term say, he's using it in in a metaphorical sense. Obviously, it's now I'm talking, I say I, but its body is saying that word I, but that is not what Bhagavan means here. When he said the body does not say I, but it's a metaphorical way of saying the body is not aware of itself as I. The reason it is not aware of itself as I is explained by him in the Kalivemba version, because he extends this first sentence by adding before it an adverbial clause, matiyāl. Since it is, that means since it is not awareness, or since it is devoid of awareness, in which it, well, there's no word it there in Tamil, but it is implied in uڵḷadu. It is implied there because it's a third person form of the verb ill, which is a negative verb. So matiyāl means since it is not awareness, the implied it there refers to this body. So since this body is not awareness, it does not say I. That is, it is not aware of itself as I. So what he implies by mati here, matiyāl, is that it's not, because the body is insentient, non-aware, or devoid of awareness. Mati is a word of Sanskrit origin, but in most general sense it means mind. But it particularly means mind in the sense of intellect or understanding. It also sometimes means mind in the sense of intellect or understanding, that it can imply buddhi, that is the intellect, but it also means mind in the sense of chittam, the will. And it's in that sense that Bhagavan uses it in verse 19, where he talks about vidhi and mati, that is fate and will. So mati, he uses mati in the sense of will. In other places he uses it in the sense of mind, or particularly in the sense of mind as in the sense of intellect. But here in this Kalivemba extension, he's using it in a slightly different sense, because it can also mean, it's a word but also is sometimes used in the sense of perception or sentience, in other words, awareness. So it's in that sense that he says it here, because the mind is not awareness, or because the mind is devoid of awareness, it does not, not mind, because the body is not is not awareness, or is devoid of awareness, it does not say I. One important thing to remember in both this verse and in the following verse, where he begins the following verse saying very much the same thing. He says, uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, but the insentient body does not say I. He begins verse 24. So in both these two verses, the first sentence, what he's saying is the body does not say I, implying the body is not aware of itself as I. But what we have to bear in mind when he uses the word body in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu and elsewhere, he is not just referring to the physical form. In verse 5, he says, Uru pancha kosa uru. The body is a form composed of 5 sheaths. Therefore, all 5 sheaths, all the 5, are included in the term body. So when he's referring to body, when he talks about body, he's not just referring to a physical form. Why is that? And why does he say it's a form of 5 sheaths? Whenever we experience a body as I, that body is always a living body. In other words, nobody has ever experienced a dead body as I. When the body is dead, our connection with it is cut off. We have no further connection with it. So it's only a living body that we experience as I. The life in the body, so the physical form of the body is what is called the Annamaya kosha. Literally, the kosha means a sheath or a covering, something that covers something like the sheath of a knife. It is covering the knife. These are called the panchakosa, the 5 sheaths or 5 coverings, because we experience them as ourselves. They in effect conceal or cover our real nature. So that's why they're called coverings. So the first covering, the outermost covering, so to speak. Again, we're talking allegorically here. The outermost covering is this physical body, which is called Annamaya kosha. Annamaya kosha means the covering composed of food, very literally. In other words, a physical body. The second kosha is the pranamaya kosha. Prana means, it can mean breath, but more generally it means life. So the sheath composed of life. Because as I said, we don't experience a dead body as I, it's only a living body. So the life in this body, what animates this body, what animates the breathing and all the physiological functions of the body, what the force that drives all these physiological functions, that is what is called prana or life. So that is the second sheath. The next 3 sheaths are manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, and anandamaya kosha. The manomaya kosha means the sheath composed of mind. Pranamaya kosha, sorry, vijnanamaya kosha means the sheath composed of intellect, and anandamaya kosha means the sheath composed of happiness. What these actually refer to are, sometimes the mind is described as antakarana, the inner organ or inner instrument. And this inner instrument is said to consist of 4 functions or 4 parts, but Bhagavan clarified they are not actually distinct parts, they're just different functions. It's one and the same thing, but it has different functions. So those 4 parts are manas, buddhi, chittam, and ahankaram. Manas means mind in the sense of that which thinks, perceives, and remembers. These are the main functions of mind. But here mind is being used as in the sense of a certain group of mental functions. So the functions of thinking, perceiving, and remembering. And there is the grosser functions of the mind. These are what is referred to as manam or the manomaya kosha. The vijnanamaya kosha or buddhi is the function of intellect. That is the faculty of mind that judges, discriminates, distinguishes one thing from another, and that thereby reasons. So the reasoning, intellectual, that aspect of the mind. So the grosser functions of the mind are driven and controlled primarily by they're driven and controlled by the intellect. That is, we're constantly using our judgment. We think this is true, that is false, and so our thinking goes according to as it is guided by the intellect. So the intellect is the judging, the reasoning, the distinguishing faculty of the mind. But there's so that is so to speak the as I said, these are called the 5 coverings. Sometimes they're described as like the layers of an onion. If you peel off all the layers of the onion, you're left with nothing in the end. So the outermost layer of this onion of 5 sheaths is the physical body. The next the next inner sheath within that is the pranamaya kosha. Within the pranamaya kosha is the manomaya kosha, the mind. So the mind is the grosser functions of the mind. In this context means the grosser mental functions. And Bhagavan says in one place in verse 8 in the 8th paragraph of Nāṇa, who am I? He says the mind is the prana is the gross form of the mind. So the life is the gross manifestation of the mind. This body seems to be alive because of the presence of mind in it. But mind, now we're analyzing the different functions of the mind. So the grosser functions are what are called manomaya kosha. Subtler than that, so as it's so to speak, metaphorically speaking, within that mind, there is the intellect. So the intellect is what is guiding the grosser functions of the mind. But there's something else that is guiding the intellect, and that is the chittam. Chittam means the will. That is what is referred to as the anandamaya kosha. It is the anandamaya, it's called anandamaya. The usual reason that is given for why it is called anandamaya is anandamaya means the sheath composed of happiness. It is generally said that the explanation given in most older texts is it's called the anandamaya kosha because when all the other sheaths disappear, we remain in a state of happiness in sleep, but that is not our real nature. So it is still a sheath. That is the sheath of happiness. Bhagavan gave a deeper analysis from this. Bhagavan said, actually, in sleep, there is no ego, and therefore there's nothing else. In the absence of ego, nothing else exists. So all that exists in deep sleep is pure awareness, the nature of which is happiness, obviously, because pure awareness is chit, and the nature of chit is ananda, is happiness. So, but all that we experience in deep sleep is pure awareness, because in the absence of ego, nothing other than our real nature exists. So actually, none of the 5 sheaths are present in sleep, according to Bhagavan's analysis. That's why he said all these 5 sheaths are experienced together as one form of this body. But body in the sense of all these 5, in the sense of a living, thinking, reasoning, desiring body. That's all these 5 together form a body. So the will is that is the totality of all our vasanas. Vasanas are the seeds that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, all these they're all different forms of desire, actually. What is driving all these is the desire. The fundamental desire we have is the desire to be happy. So, as Bhagavan says in the first paragraph of Nāṇa, happiness is the cause of love. That is, we love what makes us happy, what contributes to our happiness, we love. If something is detrimental to our happiness, we dislike it, we don't love it. So, but the dislike is just the opposite of desire. It's the other face of desire, as it were. It's often in our real nature, our love for ourselves and the happiness that we actually are, they're one and the same thing. So in duality, love and happiness seem to be 2 different things. Love seems to be directed towards happiness, but in the state of non-duality, love and happiness are one and the same thing. This is why the chittam the will is referred to as anandamaya kosha. And it is often said, though this is a fresh way Bhagavan has explained it, this is there is the seeds of this explanation are given in the older text, because it's often said what the form of the Karana Sarira, the causal body, which is another name for the Anandamaya kosha, the form of it is vasanas. That is, everything, all that is manifested waking and dream remains in seed form in sleep. Why it is said it all remains in seed form in sleep is we want an explanation. If the mind, if ego doesn't exist in sleep, how does it come into existence again in waking? Simple explanation: it remains in sleep in seed form. But according to Bhagavan, nothing exists independent of our perception of it. Since we do not perceive any seeds, any vasanas in sleep, they don't actually exist in sleep. Just like we cannot explain how the ego originally came into existence, we also cannot, it's not necessary to explain how the ego disappears in sleep and then reappears again. But if we investigate this ego, we'll find that it's unreal. It doesn't actually exist at all. So asking how the ego comes into existence, whether how it originally came into existence or how it comes into existence, how it rises again from sleep, is like asking how did the barren woman give birth to a son? Obviously, if she's a barren woman, she had no son. She's barren because she has never given birth to a child. So to ask how she has given birth to a child is meaningless, because she's never given birth to a child. Likewise, since its ego doesn't exist, trying to find explanations for how it comes into existence is meaningless. What Bhagavan says is, rather than asking how ego or how Maya comes into existence, we should ask what it is, investigate it. So that is so there are many, though Bhagavan's teachings are a very pure expression of Advaita philosophy, he has clarified many things that were not clear in all. You can go through all the old texts and you can't find the same degree of clarity as you find in Bhagavan's teachings. And another thing, while we're talking about these 5 sheaves, another thing that is another way in which Bhagavan's analysis differs, according to the analysis in many old texts, is that in waking state, we experience the gross body as I. The gross body is the Annamaya kosha. In dream, we experience the subtle body as I. The subtle body is said to consist of prana, the pranamaya kosha, manamaya kosha, and the jnanamaya kosha. But Bhagavan said, there's no difference between waking and dream. This idea that we experience a subtle body as I in dream and a gross body as I in waking is based on the premise that there is some difference between waking and dream. According to Bhagavan, our present state, the state that we now take to be waking, is just another dream. Any state in which we experience phenomena is a dream. And in every dream, we experience a body as ourself, and that body seems to be in dream, the body we experience as I in dream seems to be no less physical than our present body seems to be. It's only after waking from dream we say, oh, it was just a figment of our imagination. It wasn't a real body, it was just an imagined body. But just as imagined as that body is, this body is equally imagined. It's all a projection of our mind. So according to Bhagavan, there's absolutely no difference between waking and dream. Both are states in which we rise as ego by projecting and experiencing a body as I, and through the 5 senses of that body, perceiving a world, perceiving other phenomena. So the body, whether in waking or in dream, the body that we experience as I always consists of these 5 sheaths. That is the physical form, the life that animates it, and within that, the mind, intellect, and will. These are 5 sheaths. as I said, the antakarana is said to consist of four parts or four elements. That is manas, buddhi, chittam, and ahankaram. Ahankaram is not one of the five sheaths. Ahankaram is that is ego, is the I that rises and identifies all five sheaths as itself. The other three parts of the antakarana, they're not really parts, but the other three functions of the antakarana, the mind functions, the intellectual functions, and the functions of the will, these are all functions of the ego. It's the ego that thinks, it's the ego that perceives, it's the ego that remembers. It's the ego that's the manomaya kosha. That it's the ego that judges, that discriminates, that distinguishes one thing from another, that reasons. So it's the ego functioning through the intellect. And it's the ego that desires, hopes, fears, likes, dislikes, all these things. So all these are just different. This classification of these four antakaranas, is just classifying the ego and its functions, and it's grouping its functions together into these three groups. So these three groups are the three innermost sheaths. The subtlest of all these sheaths and the most powerful is the chittam, the will. That is what is called the karana sarira, the causal body. The reason it is called the causal body, but according to Bhagavan, everything we experience is thought. So this entire universe is nothing but thoughts, nothing but our own. Though the world seems to consist of physical phenomena, Bhagavan says those physical phenomena are actually only mental phenomena. They're only, just like in dream, everything we experience in dream, we seem to be experiencing a physical world, but all those phenomena that constitute that physical world are just our own thoughts. Likewise, this our present in our present state, all what seem to be physical phenomena are actually only mental phenomena. They're only phenomena within our own mind, projected by our own mind. Sorry, I was just trying to remember what I was saying, what I was leading up to some point there. Sorry, I've forgotten what I was leading up to a point, and I've forgotten now what the point was I was making. Oh yes, I was talking about the will, the importance of the will. The whole world, everything, all phenomena are nothing but mental phenomena. The seeds that give rise, in other words, they're thoughts. The seeds that give rise to these thoughts, every thought is a blossoming or a sprouting of a seed. Those seeds are what are called vasanas. So all our likes, dislikes, desires, hopes, fears, etc., in seed form, they are what are called vasanas. And these vasanas are what give rise to all these phenomena. But whose vasanas are they? They are ego's vasanas. So the root cause of everything is ego. That is why these verses, these four verses, 23, 24, 25, and 26 are very, very important, because here Bhagavan is analyzing ego. Sorry, this is a rather big digression, but I just wanted to clarify. When he says the body does not say I, he's not, or in other words, the body is not aware of itself as I. He's not just referring to a physical form. Even the prana is not aware of itself as I. The thoughts that constitute the thoughts and perceptions and memories that constitute the manomaya kosha, they are not aware of themselves as I. The intellectual functions that constitute ego, they're also not aware of themselves as I. Likewise, the will is not aware of itself as I. Will consists just of desires and likes, dislikes, etc. Desires aren't aware of themselves. It's the ego that is aware of all these things. Likewise, so all this body consisting of 5 sheaths seems to be aware, because we, the ego, are aware of it as if it were ourself. So these 5 sheaths, Bhagavan refers to them as body. We can also refer to them as person. If we analyze what a person is nothing but a physical form, which is living, so it's got life, and it's got a mind, intellect, and will. This is what makes up a person. But according to Bhagavan, the person is jada, the person is not aware. What is aware is ego. The ego is aware of itself as if it were that person, and so that person seems to be aware, seems to be perceiving, seems to be cognizing, aware of perceptions, thoughts, memories, reasoning, likes, dislikes, and so on. All these exist only in the view of ego. So that is the subject that Bhagavan is talking about this and in the following 3 verses. So he begins this verse by saying, this body does not say I, implying this body is not aware of itself as I. Why? Because it's devoid of mati, it's devoid of awareness. So this first sentence, along the sentence in the verse, is nāṉeṅṭṛu i-d-dēham navilādu. This body does not say I. With the Kalivembra extension, it becomes matiyāl nāṉeṅṭṛu i-d-dēham navilādu. That means, since it is devoid of awareness, this body does not say I. This body here meaning this body consisting of these 5 sheaths. So what he says in this sentence applies not only to the physical form that we now take to be I, but also the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will that seem to animate this body. They are all not aware of themselves as I. What is aware of itself as I is ego, but Bhagavan comes to that a little bit later. So that's the first sentence. The body does not say I. The body is not aware of itself as I. And then in the next sentence, second sentence, he says, uṟakkattum nāṉeṉṭṛu, uṟakkattum nāṉiṉṭṛu, eṇģu ārum navilādu ilai. Navilvadu ilai is the verb that he uses there. That means it's there in the first sentence he says navilādu, which is a negative form of the word navil. Here he's using a different negative form, navilvadu ilai, but both means no one says. So in the first sentence he says the body does not say I. Then in the second sentence he says nobody says in sleep I do not exist. Uṟakkattum nāṉiṇṭṛu means in sleep I do not exist. Nobody says that. But in English we say it as nobody said that. In Tamil, literal meaning is anybody does not say in sleep I do not exist. That's the way it's expressed in Tamil, but in English the natural way of expressing it is no one says. We merge the negative with the generic pronoun being used there. So no one says. What is the connection between these 2 sentences? We have to think a little bit about that. When he says, in the first sentence he says the body does not say I, in the second sentence he says no one says in sleep I do not exist. But the implication here is nobody, even though one is not aware, in sleep we're not aware of anybody, yet in spite of not being aware of anybody, we do not say we don't exist in sleep. We know we exist in sleep, even though we were not then aware of this body or any other body. So the body doesn't say I, and in sleep we exist even in the absence of the body. So Bhagavan is is emphasizing here, but this body is not what we actually are. None of these five sheaths are what we actually are. We continue to exist even in sleep when all these five sheaths are absent. So the implication of these two sentences is therefore neither this nor any other body can be what I actually am. Neither of these can be what I actually am, but in waking and dream, an awareness rises as I am this body. That's not stated here, but that's to provide link with the next sentence. In the next sentence, he says, nāṉeṅṭṛu eṛundapi, ellām eṛum. That means nāṉeṅṭṛu means one. Nān means I. Oṉḍru means one, but one as a noun. So in the sense of one thing. So nāṉeṅṭṛu means one thing I. Or we can take it implies one thing called I. So the meaning of his sentence, after one thing I rises, everything rises. This one thing I, this is Bhagavan is here referring to ego. In the next verse, he also uses this term nāṉeṅṭṛu, talking about the rising of the ego, and then he says, this is ego, this is Jadgranti, ego, etc. That's in the next verse, which we'll talk about next month. So what he refers to here as nāṉeṅṭṛu is the ego, the I that rises. So after one thing called I, namely the ego, the awareness that rises as I in this body rises, everything rises. It's only when we are aware of ourselves as I am this body, whether this body or some other body, in any state of dream, in any state where we're aware of phenomena, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. This body is not the same. In waking, it's this body. In dream, it was some other body. So the bodies change, but the basic awareness, I am this body, that is ego. And that's what rises in waking and dream and subsides in sleep. That is, appears in waking and dream, disappears in sleep. So only after this ego, this false awareness, I am this body, only after that rises, everything else rises. So we're aware of all other phenomena only when we're aware of ourselves as this body. That is a very, very radical and important teaching of Bhagavan. Again, this is something that hasn't been expressed so clearly, or it may have been expressed here and there, but it's in the people who've studied Advaita, ancient texts of Advaita and commentaries on them and commentaries on the commentaries. Most people are not familiar with this idea. When ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence, as he says in verse 26. When ego does not exist, everything does not exist. So the same idea that he expresses in the first sentence of verse 26, he expresses here. After one thing called I, namely the ego, the false awareness I am this body rises, everything rises. Okay, I'll discuss the next sentence, and then I'll discuss the connection between all these sentences. So that's the third sentence we've just done. After this one thing called I rises, in other words, after ego rises, everything rises. Then in the final sentence, he says, in the eṅgu eṛrum, eṉṭṛu nuṇmatiyāl enh. That means contemplate by a subtle mind where this I rises. The verb he uses, the verb he uses en, it implies, it literally means think or contemplate or consider. But obviously in this context, he's using it in the sense of investigate. So, in the sense of investigate, discern, determine, ascertain, in other words, find out. So investigate by nuṇmati where this I rises. Nuṇmati is a very important term. Nun means subtle, refined, sharp, keen, acute, precise, meticulous, or discerning. And mati, as we saw, it generally means mind, but particularly mind in the sense of intellect. But intellect not in the, here where Bhagavan is using what he refers to here as intellect or mind is not just the reasoning function of the intellect, but the primary function of the intellect is discerning, distinguishing. For example, simple logic. We all know by simple logic. We learn simple logic when we're in primary school. 1 + 1 = 2. That's a logical statement. How do we know that 1 + 1 = 2, or 2 + 1 = 3, or 2 + 2 = 4? How do we know this? It's logical, we say, but what is it that makes it logical? Somehow we're able to see, we're able to recognize, as soon as someone says, what is 1 + 1, we can see that it's 2. We can see the connection, the logical connection between saying 1 + 1 and = 2. Why 1 + 1 = 2 is something that we can see directly, as it were. This is the primary function of the intellect, and even the most deep and subtle logic, ultimately, something is logical. Something appears logical to us only when we can see how the conclusion is arrived at from the premises. So if someone says a typical one that is often given in philosophy is all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This is just there's a very simple logical argument. How we know that, because since all men are mortal, and since Socrates is a man, we're able to see immediately the connection. Yes, therefore Socrates must be mortal. We're able to recognize it. So this is the function of intellect, is to see clearly. In the case when we're talking about reasoning, we reason where there are many things. But this is that's the outward going intellect needs to reason, needs to see logical connections between one thing and the other. But here we're using the intellect to go within. So here we're using the intellect to distinguish what is real from what is unreal, what is I from what is not I. So this is what is called viveka, the distinguishing function, able to distinguish one thing from another. If someone says to us 1 + 1 = 3, we're at once able to see, no, that's wrong. We can distinguish a false statement from a true statement. If someone said 1 + 1, yes, that's obviously true. We can see that. We can also see 1 + 1 = 3 is false. So we can the ability, one of the functions of intellect is to distinguish what is true from what is untrue, what is real from what is merely appearance, distinguish reality from appearance, what is permanent from what is impermanent, what is I from what is not I. This is the subtlest function of intellect. So it's in this sense Bhagavan uses the mati, that subtle power of discerning, of distinguishing. So when we are investigating ourselves, we are trying to find out what is this I, or in this case Bhagavan expresses, where does this I rise? Why he often expresses, sometimes he expresses self-investigation in terms of investigating what am I. He sometimes expresses in this sense of investigating from where am I. The reason he says from where am I, or where I rises, is this ego is not our real, though though we now seem to be this I, which has risen and is saying, I am this body, I am Michael or whoever, though we seem to be this I, this is not what we actually are, because we exist in sleep. We exist even though this I doesn't rise. Even though we're not aware of ourselves as a body, we exist in sleep. So this I that appears as I am this body in waking and dream is not what we actually are. So we need to distinguish this. What we actually are, what we actually are is the permanent awareness. This ego is an awareness that rises in waking and dream and subsides in sleep. It's an awareness. The nature of this awareness has two primary characteristics. This false awareness called ego has two primary characteristics. The first characteristic, it is always aware of itself as if it were a body consisting of 5 sheaths. The second characteristic, it's always aware of things other than itself. It's always aware of phenomena. So it rises by being aware of phenomena and experiencing some of those phenomena, namely this form of 5 sheaths, as I. So this is where the real awareness is the awareness that exists in all 3 states. In sleep, we are not aware of any phenomena. We are just aware. So we are aware without being aware of any phenomena. Awareness of phenomena is therefore something that is added to us. It's an adjunct, an upadi. It's added to us in waking and dream, and we separate from it in sleep. So this awareness that is aware of itself as I am this body and is consequently aware of other things is not real awareness. This is just the transient awareness, the spurious awareness called ego. So we need to distinguish the real awareness, the awareness that is not aware of anything, from this awareness that is aware of phenomena. So when we're investigating ourselves, we are trying to focus our entire attention on ourself alone in order to separate ourselves, the pure awareness, from this awareness of phenomena. So long as we're aware of phenomena, we are experiencing ourselves as ego. And as ego, we experience ourselves as a body consisting of 5 sheaths. So in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to separate ourselves from this ego, this false I that rises as I am this body. So we need to distinguish very keenly, very carefully. That's why Bhagavan uses this term here, nuṇmatiyā. A subtle, it's by a subtle, refined, sharp, keen, acute, precise, meticulous, and discerning intellect or power of attention, we can say, that we are able to look within ourselves and see the source from which I rises. The source from which I rises is obviously our real nature, the pure awareness that we actually are. Here Bhagavan uses the term matiyāl. Al is the instrumental case ending. So matiyāl means by mati. So by the subtle mati. That's it's the instrumental case ending. So that's the instrument that we are to use to know ourselves, is this subtle intellect or this subtle power of attention. In verse 28, he uses a similar term. That is, the term he uses is matiyāl. Matiyāl means a very sharp, keen, focused, very literally a sharpened mind. And there he says, eṛum mahande eṛumidate. That is the place from which the rising ego rises. Matiyāl, by a sharp, keen intellect, uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. It is necessary, sinking within with a keen power of attention, with a keen intellect, it's necessary to know the place where the rising ego rises. But here Bhagavan uses place in a metaphorical sense. Obviously, it's not literally a place. it is what he means by place, idate, here is the thing from which it rises. That is, the awareness of other things arises from the pure awareness that we actually are. We cannot be aware of anything without being aware, but we can be aware without being aware of anything. So the pure awareness, the awareness that is devoid of content, but is not aware of anything, that is our real nature. That is the place from which this ego rises. This ego being the awareness that is aware of other things. So the terms he uses in these two verses, he uses a very similar. Kunda has a is very closely in meaning. It's very close to nun, which is the word he uses in this verse 23. So kunda matiyāl, nuṇmatiyā. This is the instrument that we have to use to know ourselves, to see what we actually are. So in order for us to succeed in this path of self-investigation, our mind has to become very sharp. It has to be refined, sharp, subtle. So because we are constantly directing our mind outwards, our mind means our attention outwards, to know other things, our mind has become relatively gross. We cannot distinguish subtle things because we've used it for to reason and to know this world, to know all the gross phenomena that constitute this world, and also the other mental phenomena that constitute the mind, all the thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything. All these are gross compared to the pure awareness that we actually are. So our mind has become coarse, so to speak. It has become blunted because of constantly facing outwards. In order to sharpen it, we need to repeatedly practice trying to turn within. We turn within to try to see what we actually are, or from what it is we have arisen as this ego. So the more we look within, the more our mind gets refined, gets sharpened, and it becomes more and more subtle. And only when the mind is sufficiently sharp, keen, subtle, will we be able to distinguish and be aware of ourselves as a pure awareness in complete isolation, in complete separation from this ego, the false awareness that is aware of other things. So the words Bhagavan uses here are very, very significant words that have very deep meaning. So as I say, this verse has 4 sentences. The basic meaning is: the body does not say I. No one says in sleep I do not exist. After one thing I rises, everything rises. Contemplate by a subtle mind where this I rises. To see the logical connection between all these, we can paraphrase this verse by as follows. This body is not aware of itself as I, and I does not cease to exist in sleep. That's the implication of the second sentence. Nobody says in sleep I do not exist. So the body is not aware of itself as I does not cease to exist in sleep, but after something called I rises, everything else rises. All the phenomena appear only when something calling itself I, that's something that not only calls itself I, something that is aware of itself as I am this body. After this I rises, everything else rises. So so keenly discern where it rises. So to say that again, once again, this body is not aware of itself as I, and I does not cease to exist in sleep. But after something called I rises, everything rises. So keenly discern where it rises. That is the overall meaning of this verse and the logical connection between the different sentences. This final sentence, Bhagavan ends with the word N. N is an imperative form of the verb eṇģu, which means think, consider, ponder, or contemplate. That's the basic meaning. But in this context, what it implies is investigate, discern, or ascertain. So with this subtle mind, this nuṇmati, by this nuṇmati, investigate and ascertain where this I rises. However, in the Kalivemba version, Bhagavan extended this sentence by changing this final verb, which is an imperative, en, by changing it to enna, which is an imperative form of the same verb. But in, sorry, not an infinitive. En is an imperative. Are you still hearing me? Because I've got a message saying my...
Yeah, Michael, can you hear us?
Yes. Did you miss something there?
Yes, yeah. If you could just repeat when you said in the, you were about to describe the word that in the Kalivemba verse, what he expanded the N at.
Right.
And
yes.
Start
Okay.
from there. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So N is an imperative. Enna is an infinitive form of the same verb. But in Tamil, the infinitive is often used in an adverbial sense to mean when. So whereas en means, literally it means think, enna means when one thinks. But here think is used in the sense of when one considers, contemplates, investigates, or discerns. So that's the implication, that the implied meaning of enna, when one investigates. In other words, when one investigates with a subtle mind from where it rises, and then the final verb he uses in this extended form is narovum. Narovum means narovu means to something. It's something slips off or slips away or goes into hiding, evades, escapes. If you're looking for if a small child is being naughty and you're looking for it, it will slip away and hide in next door room. In that sort of sense, Bhagavan is using it. So the meaning of the whole sentence with this Kalivemba version, the whole sentence is, inda eṅgu eṛrum eṇģu nuṇmatiyāl enna narovum. That means when one contemplates by a subtle mind where this I rises, it will slip away. So what this implies is when one investigates by this nuṇmatiyā, subtle, refined, sharp, keen, acute, precise, meticulous, discerning mind or intellect, where this I rises, it will slip away. This is another very important clue Bhagavan has given, but as far as I know, hasn't been expressed so clearly in any other, in any of the ancient texts of Advaita. That is the nature of ego, as he says later in verse 25, it comes into existence by grasping form. It stands by grasping form. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes. So the nature of ego, it comes into existence. What he refers to there as grasping form is by being aware of phenomena. The first form that it grasps, the first form that it's aware of, is the body composed of 5 sheaths, which it experiences as I. So by grasping this form, it comes into existence. By grasping for its form, it stands. And then it not only grasps this form, through the 5 senses, it grasps, it grasps, having taken this body as I, it then holds on to other forms. But Bhagavan says the ego is a formless phantom. So how does it grasp these forms? It grasps them by being aware of them. So it's by being aware of phenomena that the ego comes into existence, stands and flourishes. That's the implication in verse 25. That, but the ego itself, though all phenomena is what Bhagavan refers to as form. So though it clings to form in order to come into existence and to stand and to flourish, it itself is formless. So if it tries to Bhagavan says there, if it investigates itself, it takes flight. If sought, it takes flight, is what he says in verse 25. Why is that? Because it can stand only by, it can rise and stand only by grasping forms, that is, things other than itself. When it tries to grasp itself, since it is formless, it has nothing to hold on to, so it subsides. But of course, though Bhagavan says there, it comes into existence by grasping form, we shouldn't think that the forms are there and ego comes and grasps them, because as he says in this verse, nāṉeṅ eṛundapi ellām eṛum. After one thing I rises, everything rises. So this body and all the other phenomena, but ego grasps, don't exist except in its perception. In sleep, in dream, for example, we grasp a dream body as ourself, and then through the five senses of that dream body, we see a dream world. We don't suppose that dream body or the dream world existed independent of our perception of it. So we grasp it by, that is, in dream, as we understand about dream, projection and perception are one and the same thing. Where do we project the dream? We project it in our own awareness, in our own mind. So we become aware of the world in dream by projecting it within our own awareness. So likewise, this world, all phenomena exist only in our awareness, and they are projected by us in our awareness. So the projection of phenomena and the perception of phenomena are one and the same thing. This is why Bhagavan sometimes described this teaching as drishti shrishti vada. Drishti means seeing, literally, but it implies perception. Shrishti means creation. Vada means contention. So the contention, but creation is nothing but perception. It's only by perceiving things that we bring them into existence. They don't actually exist. No phenomena actually exist. They seem to exist in our awareness, in our mind. So it's by our projecting them that we perceive them. So projection and perception are not, or creation and perception are not two different things. We create this world by perceiving it. So when Bhagavan talks in verse 25 about the ego grasping form, what he means by grasping is not only it perceives form, it projects and perceives them simultaneously. So because the nature of ego is to come into existence and stand only by projecting and perceiving phenomena, when it tries to be aware of itself alone, if it's able to be aware of itself alone, it is then not aware of any phenomena, because it's completely withdrawn. It's focused its entire attention on itself so keenly that it is no longer aware of any phenomena. When we are no longer aware of phenomena, what remains? Pure self-awareness, which is our real nature. So ego stands only by being aware of phenomena. If it tries to be aware of itself alone, it subsides and disappears. This is the most important principle of Bhagavan's teachings. The nature of the ego is to rise by being aware of other things, to subside and dissolve back into its source by being aware of itself alone. This is why Bhagavan repeatedly said, ultimately, we cannot annihilate the ego, we cannot know ourselves as we really are by any means other than self-investigation. It is only by turning our attention back and focusing it so keenly on ourselves that we cease to be aware of anything else whatsoever, that we can eradicate this ego. Because when we cease to be aware of anything else, we are then aware of ourselves as the pure awareness that we actually are. When we are, if for example, if we see a rope but mistake it to be a snake, how to kill the snake? There's only however much you beat the rope, you're not going to kill the snake. there's only one way to kill the snake. You have to look very, very keenly, very carefully, with a nuṇmatiyā or kundamati, with a keen power of discernment. You have to look at it very carefully and see, oh, it's just a rope. As soon as you see it's just a rope, you no longer mistake it to be a snake. So you've killed the snake. And having once recognized that it's just a rope, you will no longer be afraid of it. You may be able to say, oh yes, I could, now I see how I mistook it to be a snake, but you can no longer believe it's a snake, because having once seen what it is, the mistake can never occur again. So how do we see what it really is? By looking at it very carefully. Likewise, if we look very carefully at ego, if we investigate ourselves, this I that rises as I am this body, but it's not the body we're investigating, it's only the I. The I that is aware of itself as I am this body. So if we attend to this I very keenly, it will cease to appear to be an I that is aware of itself as I am this body, but will remain as what it really is, which is pure awareness. That's just like the snake disappears as soon as we see it's a rope. As soon as we see our real nature, as soon as we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego will slip away, naravum, or teidenalotum pudikum. It'll take to flight, as he says in verse 25. So this is the most important principle. All Bhagavan's other teachings are pointing at this one principle. If we attend to other things, we are feeding and nourishing ego. If we attend to ourselves, we are undermining ego. And if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will dissolve this ego once and for all and be free forever. And when ego is destroyed, when you see that what seemed to be a snake is only a rope, you know that the rope was always there. It never was a snake. Likewise, when we see our real nature, we will know that we have always been free. We've always been nothing but pure self-awareness. Then we never rose as ego at all. Because ego is just a false appearance. And in whose view does this ego appear? Only in ego's view it appears. It appears in its own view. In the view of pure self-awareness, which is our real nature, nothing else exists. If anything else exists in its view, it wouldn't be pure awareness. It would be awareness of phenomena. That would be ego. So ego exists only in its own view. So this is a very, very subtle but it's simple. Though it's subtle, it's actually very simple what Bhagavan teaches us. It's very, very simple, but it's a very deep and profound principle that Bhagavan teaches us. And if we understand this one principle, all the other pieces of a jigsaw puzzle will fit into place. But if we don't understand this, Bhagavan's teachings won't appear to be connected. This is the hub of the wheel. That all the other teachings of Bhagavan are like spokes. This is the core of Bhagavan's teachings. When one investigates where this I rises, it will slip away. If sought, it takes flight. This is such an important principle. It's essential that we understand this. And this is the reason why self-investigation is the only way to attain liberation, to liberate ourselves from this false awareness, I am this body. It's also the only way to ultimately, however else we may try to surrender ourselves, however much we may try to surrender our will to God, we cannot surrender ourselves, we cannot give up all our likes and dislikes, because so long as we remain as a separate I, we will have our own likes and dislikes. So in order to surrender our will entirely to God, we have to surrender ourselves entirely to God. And how to surrender ourselves to God, how to become food to God, how to merge back into God, immerse ourselves in God, because God is our real nature, and because we separate ourselves from our real nature by rising as ego, and we rise as ego by being aware of other things, therefore the only way to surrender ourselves is to be aware of nothing other than ourselves. So ultimately, self-surrender can become complete only by self-investigation. So in the final leg of the journey, self-investigation and self-surrender are one and the same path, because complete surrender of ourself is possible only by self-investigation. Because what is the self we are trying to investigate? We're trying to surrender. It's nothing but ego. The ego is nothing but a false awareness of ourself. So we can surrender it only by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. And in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. So all Bhagavan's teachings, the core of Bhagavan's teachings tie together. They're coherent. They all hold together in such a clear, simple, and logical manner. So these four verses we can say are the very heart of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. It's verse 23, 24, 25, and 26. If we think deeply about these verses and understand the principles that Bhagavan is expressing through these verses, then we've understood the very heart of Bhagavan's teachings. Everything else will become clear. Everything else will fall into place. If these four verses are understood, the whole of Bhagavan's teachings is understood. Okay, there may be some loose ends, but those loose ends can easily be tied up if we understand all these core principles. The principles expressed in these four core verses. So Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu is the heart of Bhagavan's teachings, and the heart of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu are these four verses. So this month I talked about this, and the next 3 months I'll be talking about the next 3 verses. Essentially, what Bhagavan is saying in all of them is what he says in this verse, he elaborates upon in the next 3 verses, but the core of it is all in this verse. But this verse has to be understood in the light of the next 3 verses. So the 4 together form a whole. And if we understand these 4 verses, then the real meaning of other verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu will become clear. And if we understand the meaning of other verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, all nāṇya and all these other things will become clear.
Thank you, Michael.
I think I've talked for a very long time today. I've taken up most of the time, but it's such an important verse. I hope I haven't. I hope what I said managed to keep your interest, because as I say, what Bhagavan says here is very, very simple, but it is so important.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's good. I think it was on. Actually, it seemed long, but it was really on target. I mean, it seemed to be coherent. The stress on logic, the stress on the link of these 4 sentences, everything flowed well. Anybody has any questions? As Ravi, if you'd like to come here, so Michael can see you, if possible. Yeah, thank you.
Michael, I must confess that in the beginning part of the lecture, I had a little difficulty following the subtle things that you're saying. In particular, I was getting lost in all of these words.
Okay.
Jara body, inert body can be a sentient and all that. But
right.
towards the end, you brilliantly brought us home of the central teaching and what we should focus on, and for our spiritual.
Yeah, I did at the beginning when I was talking about the first sentence, I did digress by talking about the 5 sheaves and about the antakarana. But why I did that is because it's very, very important to understand when Bhagavan talks about body, he's not just talking about the physical body. He's talking about the whole package. The 5 sheaves are one package.
I do that because I can go back and listen a few times because it's being recorded.
Yes.
so that I can try to mine some gems of understanding, improve my understanding. So, it's a very nice. But I also had one question that came to my mind about these various theories of creation, which you also alluded to, the simultaneous creation of Bhagavan and the Drishti, Srishti Vada.
Yes.
The common sense view that we have about as a, the Vyavaharika view is that we see the world and it exists, that's why we see it. No, the world exists, that's why we see it.
Exactly.
It's the reverse of that. And that's a phenomenological view of the world, right? You have Big Bang, you have the creation of agriculture and chemistry and all this human civilization as progress. And there is an aspect, you may have even referred, but other people have referred to, is that all these yugas are created by the dreams of Brahma in the cosmic mind, and we somehow get connected to it.
Yes.
That doesn't seem very consistent with the Advaita philosophy that we seem to, or Bhagavan seems to, think that's conducive to our spiritual understanding.
But how did Brahma create the world?
Yeah,
even there a clue is given. Even in these other theories, clues are given. Brahma created the world by thought.
By his own mind.
Right.
So though it is said as if Brahma is someone else, who is Brahma? Brahma is nothing but ego. It is ego by its own thought that has created the world. So indirectly, though that is, the truth is expressed in different ways to suit different levels of spiritual maturity, different levels of grasping. But if we understand Bhagavan's teachings, then we understand that when it is said Brahma has created the world by his thought, it is allegorical. That's an allegorical way of saying it. But actually, Brahma is nothing but ego, and it has created the world by it. The world is nothing but mental, in other words. So it's implied there, even in the creation myths. And there's one thing that distinguishes Hinduism from all other theistic religions, whereas in all other theistic religions, the most important quality of God is God has created the world. In Hinduism, who is the one God who nobody worships? Brahma, the creator, because he's the source of the trouble.
Very nice. Brahma, the troublemaker, I'll remember that.
So he's unqualified for being worshipped. But in religions, there are many different levels. Take a book, take a text like the Mahabharata. It's a big book with so many stories and sub-stories and sub-stories. Puranikas, people who talk about these things, they can explain it in so many different ways. What was the significance of all these stories? But and it's true not only with Mahabharata, with all the Puranas and everything, they can be interpreted on many different levels. And so also the heart of the Mahabharata is said to be Bhagavad Gita. Even Bhagavad Gita can be interpreted in many different ways. So it's all these texts are there to cater to the needs of people of different levels of maturity. And according to our level of maturity, the ultimate truth is given there in Mahabharata. But the path of self-investigation is explained very, very clearly in 2 verses of Mahabharata. That is, in the Mahabharata, there is Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's chapter 6. And in chapter 6, there's verses, I think, 24 and 25. there, the Bhagavan has translated into Tamil as in Bhagavad Gita Saram. In those two verses, the path of self-investigation is given very, very clearly. I'm just trying to remember exactly what the verse is. That is basically it's saying with Atma Samstam Manakritva, by drawing the mind away from all things, fix the mind in oneself and do not think of anything else. In Tamil Bhagavan says, do not think of anything else. Now kinchitapi chintayet is in Sanskrit. Do not think of anything else at all. So fix your mind in yourself and do not think of anything else. And then in the next verse, sane, slowly, slowly. The nature of the mind is to be constantly going outwards. Slowly, slowly draw it back and fix it in itself. So the whole of Bhagavan's path of self-investigation is given there in chapter 6, which is the heart of Bhagavad Gita, which is the heart of the whole of Mahabharata. So these things are given there, but Bhagavan has given it in a way which is so, so clear. Otherwise, those two verses of Gita, they're two among, 18 chapters, I think 700 or 800 verses in Bhagavad Gita. Those two verses get lost among all the other things because their other teachings are given to suit other different levels of maturity, but it's given there. So what Bhagavan has done, Bhagavan's teachings are like the Amrita that has been churned from the ocean of Vedanta. The ocean of Vedanta, the essence of Vedanta is Advaita. And the essence of Advaita, the cream that has been, the nectar, the Amrita, that has been churned out of this ocean is Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan's teachings are the purest expression, the deepest and subtlest expression of the whole Vedanta philosophy. So if we've studied Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, we don't need to study any Upanishads, any Brahma Sutras, any Upanishads, any commentaries on all these things, because it's all about the cream of it all, the essence of it all has been expressed more clearly in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu than you can find in all the other texts. So we are so, so fortunate to have Bhagavan and his teachings.
So, Michael, in this pursuit of self-investigation, as Bhagavan taught us,
yes,
we seem to have a love-hate relationship with both mind and ego. They are the villain, and also the only instrument that we have to use because we are trapped in words and things. Try to go beyond words.
Yeah, but ego isn't even an instrument. Ego is what we seem to be. It is ego that has to investigate itself and see what it actually is. And when it sees what it actually is, then it is no longer ego. Ego can never realize itself, but it can never see what it actually is. But by seeing what it actually is, it ceases to be ego. So that's why Bhagavan always said, who is to do the investigation? Our real nature, Atmaswarupa, doesn't need to do investigation. Brahman doesn't need to.
That always.
The whole teaching is given only for ego.
Okay. So it's all geared towards ego for its own good, trying to destroy itself.
Yes, yes. But how can it destroy itself? The only way to destroy itself is to see what it really is. And when it sees what it really is, there was never anything to destroy. There's a dangerous snake there. It looks very dangerous. We have to try and kill it. But when we actually, the only way to kill it is to see what it actually is. When we see what it actually is, we see there never was any snake. Our fear of it was ungrounded.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, come on.
This is the real, that is the real benefit of Bhagavan's teachings. It should leave us speechless. It's only immature people like me who go on talking.
Thank God for that.
Go ahead.
I try to understand, and I have been reading quite a bit to understand the concept of the psychological divisions of the body into 5 sheaths is easy to understand. It's not a difficult task at all. But the fact that ego doesn't exist by itself, it has to add on to something that is a phenomenon or whatever is existing. Yeah. So basically what that means is we have to purge all the things that we have in our mind so that we don't let ego to hold on to anything that is adverse to us.
Yes.
So how to purge this, the vasanas or the adverse objects or phenomenon that we have been living with so that we don't let the ego to hold on to those?
There is one way and one way only. That is, we cannot get rid of thoughts by wanting to get rid of thoughts, because the desire to get rid of thoughts is itself a thought. Not only that, the one who wants to be free of thoughts is ego, which is itself a thought. So we need a trick, we need a tantra to get rid of this. Bhagavan is the greatest of all tantric masters because he knows the trick to get rid of the root of all this problem. The trick he has given us is don't bother about thoughts. In Nāṇa, he said, what's it matter however many thoughts appear? As and when each thought appears, investigate to whom it's appeared. In other words, turn your attention back to yourself. So long as we worry about thoughts, how to get rid of these thoughts, we can never get rid of them. Bhagavan used to say, if you go to a doctor and the doctor say, I got just the medicine for your illness, but when you take this illness, you mustn't think of a monkey. Every time you want to take the medicine, you remember what the doctor said. Because we have to take the medicine according to the doctor's instructions. So we have to, I mustn't think of a monkey. Then we can never take the medicine. So long as we are worried about thoughts, so long as we're trying to get rid of thoughts, we will never get anywhere, because our very concern about thoughts is itself a thought. Even the one who is concerned about thoughts is itself a thought. So forget about thoughts, Bhagavan says. Don't worry about thoughts. Let any number of thoughts come. What's it matter? Investigate yourself. If you turn your attention back towards yourself, the ego will subside, and the thought which had risen will also subside, because there's no one to attend to it. So long as we attend to them, we are feeding thoughts. We are feeding ego. The only thought which will disappear if we attend to it is ego. Nowadays, there are so many gurus, because in ancient texts it is said, but we are, in order to try and help us distinguish ourselves from all the things that we take ourselves to be, it is said, you are the witness. Behind all these mental activities and everything, you are there as a witness. Actually, what is witnessing all these things, what is aware of all these things, is ego. But witness is also, in some texts, it's referred to as Brahman as the witness. Their witness, Bhagavan says, doesn't mean that Brahman is seeing all these things, but in the presence of Brahman, all these things are happening. But because this word Sakshi is used in many Vedantic texts and in many Advaitic commentaries on them and everything, many people believe But if you witness your thoughts, you are then thereby abiding as Brahman. So this so many gurus recommend this practice of witnessing. But according to Bhagavan, if you, by witnessing any thought, you are feeding it. Thoughts seem to exist only because we're aware of them. So by watching them, we are just perpetuating the thoughts. Not only we're perpetuating the thought, we're perpetuating the ego, because the ego seems to exist only when it's aware of things other than itself. So there's only one thought that we need to witness, because there's only one thought that will cease to exist if we attend to it. That is ego. If you attend to any other thought, you are just perpetuating, you're feeding that thought. So all these gurus nowadays who say, oh, just watch your thoughts, sooner or later everything will become quiet and the thoughts will cease. It's not true. Bhagavan has explained this as a scientific principle. Ego comes into existence by being aware of things other than itself, by being aware of phenomena. All thoughts are phenomena, all phenomena are thoughts. So by being aware of any phenomena, we are nourishing the ego and thereby sustaining the phenomena. But instead of attending to any phenomena, if we attend to ourselves, the one who is the perceiver of all those phenomena, don't attend to any object, attend to the subject. Don't attend to any second or third person, attend to the first person. That is the way to get rid of all second and third person. That is the way to get rid of all thoughts. Because there's only one thought which will subside when we attend to it. That one thought is the first thought, the primal thought, the thought called I, the ego. So Bhagavan has got an answer to whatever question you may ask. Bhagavan has got an answer to it, and his answers are so simple and so logical also. We cannot fault Bhagavan. We cannot find a logical flaw in Bhagavan's teachings.
Thank you very much.
And also Bhagavan's teaching, Bhagavan doesn't ask us to believe anything that we do not know. Like when Bhagavan says, when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That seems a very radical thing. How can we accept that? No, surely the world was created by a big bang some 13 billion years ago, or it was created by Brahma, by his thought or something. So how can we say it all comes into existence only when ego comes into existence? Bhagavan says, consider your own experience. Only when you wake up in the morning does the world seem to exist. When you're asleep, if the world is there during your sleep, why doesn't the world come and tell you during your sleep? Why does it have to wait till waking to say, oh, I was there all along, even when you were asleep, I was there? We can't trust it, because if it really was there during sleep, let it come and tell us while we're asleep. It doesn't come and tell us. We are aware in sleep, but we are not aware of the world. The world appears only when we rise as ego, only when we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, are we aware of a world, whether this world or some world in our dream. So the false awareness, I am this body, and the awareness of other phenomena, they appear simultaneously and they disappear simultaneously. Simple logic tells us if two things always appear together and always disappear together, there's a connection between them. There's that constant conjunction is significant. And why should we believe anything exists when we don't perceive it? We can't have any evidence, but there's absolutely no evidence that the world exists when we're asleep. With all the evidence we try to produce to show that the world existed during our sleep, we can produce that evidence only in the waking state. But if this waking state is a dream, then the evidence means nothing. Everyone will tell you, oh yes, when you were asleep, I saw your body, so the world didn't disappear when you were asleep. But when can they tell you that? They can tell you only in your waking state or in your dream state. They can't tell you in your sleep. So Bhagavan said, that is, relying on the testimony of the world to say that it existed during sleep is like relying on the testimony of a thief to say he didn't steal. Of course the thief is going to say, I didn't steal. So he will always bear witness to the fact that he's innocent. So if you believe the thief, you're going to be deluded. So this world, likewise, all the people who tell you that the world existed when you were asleep, all those people are part of the world whose existence is in question. So their testimony doesn't count for anything.
Let me share with you a common expression in our language, which is Telugu in India.
Yes.
Jagame Maya, Bratuke Maya. Maya means illusion.
Yes.
The world is an illusion.
Yes.
The life is an illusion.
Yes.
Itself is an illusion.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
This is put into the songs and sung in the movies and at other functions and things like that. But that is the essence of it, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Even the one who sees this illusion is itself an illusion.
Yeah.
Who did this illusion appear? It appears only to ego.
Right.
And is this ego real? What is the ego? The ego is nothing but the awareness, the false awareness, I am this body. Why is this awareness false? Because if this body were actually what we are, we couldn't be aware of ourselves without being aware of this body. But as Bhagavan says, nobody says in sleep I didn't exist, even though we weren't aware of anybody in sleep. So the fact that we were aware of ourselves in the absence of any body in sleep, and the fact that in dream we're aware of ourselves as one body, in waking we're aware of ourselves as another body, neither of those bodies can be what we actually are. So we cannot be what any body but we seem to be. Yet only when we seem to be a body, we seem to be aware of other things. So it's only the I that is aware of itself as I am this body, that is aware of all other things. This I that is aware of itself as I am this body is itself a false awareness. So how can we rely on its awareness of other things when it itself is a false awareness? So the logic of Bhagavan's teachings is so simple, and not only is it logical, it is based entirely upon our experience. Bhagavan doesn't ask us to believe anything, but we haven't actually, that is not actually under our experience.
It's based on both Nyaya and Anubhava.
Yes, yes.